Welcome back to the Game Positive Podcast. It has been a long time since my last episode, as it turns out having more than one kid is the dark souls of parenting, but I'm finally able to hop back on the mic and I'm ready to try and bring this show back from the dead. While I was away, I did get some awesome feedback from listeners, and so I have made some slight changes here. Going forward, the episodes will be broken into two parts, with one part being my thoughts on recent gaming news, which is backed by popular demand, followed up by a piece of featured content. This news will be very conversational, raw and unedited, and the featured content will be more scripted content. Features will vary in terms of what they are about, ranging from talking in depth about a specific game or studio, or a new concept entirely that will in fact be appearing in this episode, which is a review of everything that came to Game Pass in the previous month. I do plan on continuing the Insert Coin interview show in the somewhat near future, but scheduling will likely continue to be an issue there, and I also plan on remastering some, if not all, of the transitional music in the near future as well. So the timeline of that show's return is still somewhat up in the air. When those shows do return, they will be their own thing and release kind of more of a bonus type episode. So stay tuned for that. As always, these will be available on all podcast services and YouTube. However, the YouTube version of this will actually be uploaded into two separate videos, with one being the news and one being whatever the featured content is. Before we jump into the news, though, I just want to take a second and go over some of the recent highlights over at Season Gaming. For those of you that don't know, Season Gaming is an independent video games website that is founded and ran strictly by a passion for the hobby. Everything that shows up on that site is written by gamers for gamers, and there's no ads or sponsored content. As many of you know, I'm actually now a contributor/writer for the website, and most of the featured content you'll hear on the podcast can actually be found in written form over at seasongaming.com. So head over there after the show and check that out. As always, make sure to follow or subscribe if you are not already, and I would love to get any and all feedback. As always, make sure to follow or subscribe if you have not already, and I would love to get any and all feedback on the return of the show, good or bad, so feel free to reach out on Twitter, YouTube comments, or in the Season Gaming Discord. All right, pregame is over. Let's jump into the show. All right, so here is the seasoned update for the show. First of all, I wanted to mention that my review for Kirby and the Forgotten Land was posted. I really enjoyed writing that review and really enjoyed that game. For more information on my thoughts, head over to Season Gaming to check that out. Pretty soon, I actually have a review for Vampire the Masquerade Blood Hunt, which will be going live in the next few days. A really interesting interview with the game director of Godfall, Daniel Nordlander, by Xbox Expansion Pass's own host, Luke Lohr. Ainsley Bowden has a review for Rogue Legacy 2, which is another phenomenal game, and a very, very special episode of the Season Gaming Bitcast, which is the Season Gaming weekly podcast show that's on every Sunday. Episode 200 was live, and on episode 200, they had several members of the gaming community drop by to say hello and share any gaming stories they may have at the top of their head. Yours truly actually made a very brief appearance near the end, so make sure to check that out. That was one of the better shows I've seen. The amount of support that Season Gaming and the Bitcast especially gets from the gaming community at large is very, very special. So without further ado, let's jump into some news. First up on the docket, we have some PlayStation news, specifically revolving around the changes that are coming to the PlayStation Plus service and kind of the fallout that's happened with some of those reveals. So what's essentially happening is the standard PlayStation Plus membership that right now is Pretty straightforward. There's only one option, and it gives you access to online gaming as well as 2 or 3, sometimes more, free games that you can download every month. Very similar to Xbox Live Gold, although I will admit that the games that they offer on PlayStation Plus are typically vastly superior to what we get with games with gold. Mind you, we have Xbox Game Pass to circumvent that, which is kind of the crux of why the PlayStation service is changing so much. So what they have done is they've split that single service into a tiered system with 3 optional tiers. So at the beginning, you have the PS Plus Essential tier, which is more or less a carbon copy of the current PlayStation Plus service. So the Essential tier is one for any current subscriber that kind of wishes to keep their membership the way it is. It's more or less simply a rebranding of what we know PS Plus as today. It just has a new name, PS Plus Essential. This tier gives you, as they say, 1 PS5 game and 2 PS4 games a month as part of your membership, so 3 games total, as well as access to online multiplayer, cloud storage, which is somewhat, or for some reason, still locked behind that monthly paywall, and it gives you exclusive store discounts, which in my experience are actually quite good a lot of the time. Pricing for that is the same as it is right now, which is $9.99 a month or $59.99 a year. That's in US dollars for anyone listening in Canada or any other country. The second tier, which is one of the new ones, is PS Plus Extra. And this essentially combines the pre-existing PS Plus service and the pre-existing PS Now service under one roof. And PS Now is, I wouldn't call it a competitor to Game Pass, but it is Sony's kind of games as a game service where you can download or stream a lot of different titles. Both of those will be combined, and as an added bonus we'll start to include PS5 titles. This catalog is said to reach up to 400 PS5 and PS4 games combined, with all of them being downloadable, which is a good thing because the streaming aspect of it is kind of hit or miss depending on what your internet speed will be. At launch, the lineup will include Death Stranding, God of War, Marvel's Spider-Man, Miles Morales, Mortal Kombat 11, and Returnal, among many others, which is pretty good, to be honest. Some of those games are actually already included in the PS Plus collection, like God of War, but Spider-Man, Miles Morales, and Returnal, those are really amazing games that are currently, in Canada anyway, $90. So that's a pretty good value, even though those games are not day and date, which is a topic that we will circle back to. The next and final tier is called the PS Plus. Oh, sorry, I forgot to mention the pricing of PS Plus Extra is $14.99 a month, so an extra $5, or $99 a year, or an extra $40. Again, those are in US dollars. So the next tier is PlayStation Plus Premium, and with this most premium version of the subscription, you're going to have the ability to stream PS3 games to your console, which is kind of a controversial feature there, as a lot of people want to have that download aspect, but the PS3 cell architecture apparently is just too complex to emulate on a PS5 or PS4. And by too complex, I just mean it will cost too much money, essentially. There are modders out there who have already done this on PC, and the Xbox Series X and the PS5 are very similar to a PC. There is no doubt in my mind that the engineering for this is possible. It's just a matter of if it's worth it to Sony. And I'm sure that they have numbers that suggest that it's not worth it, which is why they're going to be streamed to your console. And you can take that for what it's worth. These titles, again, are only available for streaming. So download options won't be present. But in addition to that, the catalog will also extend beyond PS5 and PS4 and PS3 streaming to also include PS1, PS2, and PSP titles, which will be downloadable. In total, the list of PS1, PS2, PS3, and PSP games included is said to reach 340, which is actually a very large number. Both the number of games that are added in addition with PS Premium, plus the base games that come with PS Plus Extra, both of those numbers are higher than the total amount of games on Game Pass. So there's significantly more games on offer with these services here. Finally, time-limited game trials of newer games will be available through PS Plus Premium, which has also got some people a little bit riled up, but I will kind of jump into that in a second. The pricing for that will be $17.99, so an extra $3 on top of the Plus Extra pricing, and then $119 per year. So if you do the math here, you actually get a significant savings if you subscribe to it on a yearly basis, where that type of discount doesn't exist with Game Pass. So that's another kind of advantage to the PS Plus tiered system. Now let's look at a couple things. I already touched on the PS3 streaming, which I don't think is great. There are some games I will say on PS3 that are slower paced, like some JRPGs and stuff like that. If they show up on the catalog, they may be okay with streaming. I personally don't enjoy streaming. For me, the latency, it's just, I don't know. Maybe it's just a personal thing, but even a slight amount of latency just really drives me bonkers. I'm the person who would spend like hours calibrating their TV so that Guitar Hero was perfect back when that used to be an issue. So I'm not really interested in the streaming aspect of the PS3 games. I personally also own a PS3 and I have a pretty decent library of PS3 games, so it doesn't necessarily affect me personally that much because I can still play those games on my original hardware, but that's not an option for a lot of people. So I understand why people are upset about that because, like I said earlier, it is possible to emulate PS3 on PC very well. In fact, the games are running on PC much better than they ran on the original hardware. But you can't deny that there is a huge amount of great games in the PlayStation back catalog, and 340 new titles, assuming that most of them are not PS3 streaming games, which we don't really have a breakdown yet. That is a lot of extra value for only an extra $3 a month or $20 a year. The timed game trials is something that has kind of gotten some people upset. I've seen some people talk about how the developers are not being paid extra for the extra work of programming and coding a demo. I can't sit here and say for 100% certainty that I know how this is all going to play out in the back end. But if I had to guess, I don't think that the developers are going to necessarily need to really do anything. If this is something where it's just simply a 2-hour trial, there are backend API services that PlayStation can manage and create that will be able to tell like when you started playing and when you're 2 hours up and simply lock you out of the game. This already happens on PlayStation and Xbox with the time trials that exist with EA Access, for example. A lot of newer EA multiplayer games like Battlefield and stuff like that will give EA Access members a 10-hour trial, and that is kind of done on the system end, where the system knows that you've started the game, it starts this background timer, and then it will kick you out when that timer is reached. That's why on Xbox, for example, if you did take part in any of those Battlefield trials or Battlefront trials, you'll see that the interface that pops up when you launch the game to remind you of the fact that you're on a trial and how much time is left, that interface is an Xbox interface. It's not something that EA had to like spend hours developing. I see a lot of people comparing this to a demo, which is completely different. A demo is something that the developers will have to spend a lot of time developing because it's usually a vertical slice that is specifically crafted for the purpose of demoing to potential customers or publishers, right? That's something that the work is specifically done for this piece outside of all the additional work that they do to create the game. So assuming that it is more like the time trials that currently exist, or even if you look beyond consoles and you look at Steam, every single game that you buy on Steam technically has a 2-hour trial in the sense that you can get refunded if you don't enjoy the game within the 2 hours of playing. And that 2 hours of playtime is not tracked by the game specifically. The developers do not have to code a system inside of their game in addition to their normal workload that will tell Steam that the user has played for 2 hours. That's not additional work on their end. It's all tracked by Steam itself. So again, the developers are not really having to do a lot of additional work. The controversy from my perspective comes in the fact that it's not optional for the developers. There are some safeguards in place that I've seen where the retail value of the game has to exceed a certain figure. I think it's $35 in order to have that trial. So smaller, cheaper games that may only have like a 4 or 5 hour runtime don't have to give away half their game for free in a trial. I guess the assumption is that games that cost more than $35 or whatever the amount might be will have a significantly longer runtime than the 2 hour trial will provide. But I still wish that there was some type of appeal system where, let's say you're shipping a game that's maybe 8 hours, which you can. It's not uncommon to have a $35 game that might be 6, 7, 8 hours. Then you're essentially giving away like 20, 30% of your game for free, which is quite a bit, especially if it's not something that you wanted to do in the first place, if it's mandatory. So I would like to see some type of appeal system where a developer can make a case to say like this 2 hour block is a significant chunk of our game that we don't want to give away for free. But I mean, obviously that puts in a lot of extra work in the back end for Sony to have to deal with those appeals. So I don't know. That might be kind of a pie in the sky type thing. But yeah, I think that the service itself, it's going to basically rest on how good the games are. Like I said at the beginning, there is significantly more games here than Game Pass offers. The question becomes, how is the quality different? We know that with Game Pass, you're going to get day one releases like Starfield, Halo Infinite, the next Gears game, the next Fable game, like all of those are going to appear day one. So you know that you're saving the full retail price of those games every time one drops on the service. Whereas if they didn't get added for a couple of years, then the value isn't as good. But maybe the total amount of games kind of evens that out a little bit. Personally, I'll be definitely subscribing to this, especially with the insane savings that you get if you subscribe yearly. So I guess it remains to be seen what the full catalog looks like. This service will be launching at near the end of June. Next up, Xbox and Bethesda have revealed that they are still clinging on to the dream of E3 with a showcase that they announced happening on June 12th, 2022, which is a Sunday. Xbox has been extremely quiet up until now. There hasn't been any like real showcases of any kind, whereas with Sony, we've gotten 2 so far, and I believe there was some Nintendo Directs at the beginning of the year as well. So Xbox hasn't really done a ton of stuff. There has been some really awesome additions to Game Pass that have been announced in Xbox Wire posts and stuff like that, but there hasn't been like a curated showcase. And so it's really, and then with the announcement of this one in June, which is only a month away, it doesn't really feel like there's going to be one before this kind of quasi E3 presentation. It's interesting that they are still going with the Xbox plus Bethesda naming convention, implying that there is some distinction between the two brands, which is technically true because there are different people running the teams at Bethesda versus the teams at Xbox Game Studio. So that does kind of make sense. I'm not going to go too deep into predictions because I do plan on making a prediction video and podcast that is closer to the actual date to kind of, hedge my bets a little bit with some potential leaks and whatnot. But I will say that I expect Starfield to be a headliner once again. I think that there's going to be a Fallout 4 reveal level of Starfield content. I think that's going to be a heavy part of the show, if not the heaviest part of the show. But I also think that they have a lot to prove here because they do have this massive amount of IP and massive amount of teams at their disposal. And they have kind of all been resting on the potential of having all of that. There hasn't really been a lot of things that have actually released or that they've actually shown. There was actually a quote from a long time ago, back when the Xbox originally launched, that was something along the lines of Microsoft has the biggest cannon in the world that's pointed right at Sony. And that was in reference to the fact that Microsoft, obviously at the time, and they still are, one of the richest companies in the world, and they're investing a ton of money into buying it, or into like very much just disrupting the gaming market. And that biggest cannon was referring to the fact that they are making a ton of deals to get a ton of software for the Xbox. And I think that right now that same kind of moniker applies. They have so much stuff that they could showcase. It really depends on how far along these projects are, but there's a lot of stuff that we don't know about. We know that games like Contraband, games like Everwild, games like Fable are being worked on, and Perfect Dark, but we have no idea what they actually look like. And all of those games are kind of at a point where we really need to start seeing what those look like. And then there's a ton of teams that we don't know exactly what's happening with, like Machine Games or id Software, stuff like that, where there's a ton of room for surprises. And then as always, there's always the wild card of third-party releases, whether that be publishing agreements or Game Pass or surprise Game Pass launches, stuff like that. So they have a lot to prove here, and waiting this long to show anything in 2022 and being one of the only ones confirmed to have a big E3-esque showcase, there's really a lot at stake here. So I'm really looking forward to this. And like I said, there will be a predictions show as well as a recap show, both on the podcast in the near future. Next up, there is some Halo Infinite news with the Season 2 being fully revealed. Season 2 is actually coming out in a couple hours as I record this, so this is kind of before I got a chance to play it, but I'm going to go over what's coming and sort of my thoughts on that. So first up, there's going to actually be 3 new game modes. First one being Last Spartan Standing, which is a 12-person quasi-semi battle royale. I don't know if I like calling it a battle royale when it's only 12 people, but essentially 12 people are going to spawn on a big team battle map with a confined loadout and only 5 respawns, which will make it quite a little bit different than a traditional battle royale, as you can respawn up to 5 times. If you get killed, you can upgrade to a different weapon, which fans of Escalation will enjoy. And the match ends when there's only one player left standing. So this is probably the most interesting of the new modes that are coming by the fact that it is quite new. There hasn't really been anything like this in Halo before. I'm definitely interested to try it out, but I tend to be more interested in team-based modes, whereas this is obviously going to be more of a free-for-all. So, and one aspect of Halo Infinite that really irks me a little bit is how a lot of the XP is challenge gated and the challenges are very specific. So if there was a challenge, let's say that was like, I don't know, get X kills or something like that, which can happen, although they're not as common, then you could kind of spread those kills across different playlists. However you want to play, you can start picking away at that. But if there is a challenge for, say, get 10 kills in Last Spartan Standing, then you're forced into playing these modes, which is something that I'm not a super hyped about, especially since you can only have a limited number of active challenges. So a lot of times challenges that you don't want to do end up blocking ones that you would actually enjoy doing, which is not necessarily being addressed this season, but obviously they always take player feedback. And honestly, at the end of the day, if you're playing the game and enjoying it, you're still getting XP. So laser focusing on the challenges is probably not the best way to enjoy the game anyway. So not a huge issue. I just thought I'd bring that up. The next mode they're bringing back is King of the Hill, which is pretty self-explanatory. And the final new mode is Land Grab, where there will be 3 points on the map to capture, and you can earn a point when a zone is locked down. If you capture all 3 points, 3 new zones will appear, and then you're going to fight over those zones. The first team to reach 11 will win the match. So that is a little bit more interesting than your standard territories mode. There's a little bit more pressure to capture. Sometimes in territories, you can just kind of let them capture and then regroup, whereas there's a lot more pushing that's involved in land grab. So that will be an interesting shakeup. They're also adding 2 new maps, 1 big team map, 1 arena map, which is good to see. And they're also continuing the story from the Academy. I wouldn't say there was much of a story in the Academy, although there obviously was a cutscene and there was the pre-release trailer that featured the Academy Spartan. So it is cool to see that they are implementing story aspects into the multiplayer. One thing that's really interesting is they are going to obviously have cutscenes to kind of tell this ongoing story that they have said will actually span multiple seasons. But what's interesting is the cutscenes that the stories will be told through will actually feature your Spartan inside of them, similar to Halo Reach and stuff like that. So I'm very interested to see how this plays out. I kind of suspect that with Season 2, based on all the other issues that they've been working through, I don't think that all of the development time between the launch of Season 1 and the launch of Season 2 was spent specifically on Season 2 content. I think that's pretty obvious that they are putting a lot of work into fixing their progression problems, fixing co-op, creating Forge, and just a lot of back-end stuff that unfortunately players are not going to really see the differences, but they will feel them just in the day-to-day playing of the game. So that took a precedent and took priority. So I don't expect this story mode to be fully fleshed out at the beginning of Season 2, but I do think that we'll get a glimpse of the potential that it could bring to the franchise, and that's what I'm really, really excited about. Last piece of news is quite big. Scandinavian holdings company Embracer Group has entered into a deal with Square Enix to buy all of their Western development teams. I'll read to you the statement here from Embracer Group. It says, Embracer Group has entered into an agreement to acquire the development studios Crystal Dynamics, Eidos Montreal, and Square Enix Montreal, and a catalog of IPs including Tomb Raider, Deus Ex, Thief, Legacy of Kain, and more than 50 back catalog games from Square Enix Holdings. In total, the acquisition includes 1,100 employees across 3 studios and 8 global locations. The total purchase price amount is USD $300 million on a cash and debt-free basis to be paid in full at closing. So last part doesn't really matter. Essentially, it costs $300 million to buy Crystal Dynamics, Eidos Montreal, Square Enix Montreal, which is mostly a mobile studio, and all the IPs that are associated with those studios, which is a crazy, crazy deal when you look at the cost of the more recent acquisitions that we've seen with Activision Blizzard, Bungie, Bethesda, and stuff like that. So this kind of started a lot of conversations about, if this deal was so good and the price was so good, why didn't Microsoft buy them? Why didn't Sony buy them? Like the acquisition talks between the fans of each platform are alive and well at all times. So it's natural for them to kind of wonder why they wouldn't jump at this when there's such a good deal. It seems like such a good deal when you consider how much the rest of the acquisitions that have happened recently have cost. So there's a couple of reasons why I don't think that each studio, Microsoft and Sony, would have jumped in on this. I'll start with Microsoft. So the first one, that is the most obvious one, is that right now they are in the process, obviously, of acquiring Activision Blizzard King. And that process has made some great progress, where the board of Activision has approved the buyout with a 98% approval rating, which is extremely high, which is expected. But they also have the final hurdle of the FTC potentially having issues with the acquisition. So any other acquisition that they make between now and when that deal officially closes with the FTC is ammo that the FTC can use against Microsoft in the arbitration of that other Activision acquisition. I know I'm saying the word acquisition a lot, but hear me out. So the main argument that the FTC will have against Microsoft is one of consolidating tech and also creating a monopoly. So even though I personally don't think that they're doing that, I don't personally think that they are becoming a monopoly when you look at how big gaming is and how they're not even, after that deal, they're not even close to being the biggest gaming company. Any future acquisition that they make, it does piles onto that their argument of them creating, or attempting to at least create, a monopoly. So I think it's smart for Microsoft to kind of pump the brakes a little bit, even though it probably was painful to see a deal like this go across somebody else's desk. I think it's the wise decision is to make sure that the big chicken is fully secured with Activision Blizzard before they start reaching out to other big acquisition deals like this one. The other reason, which I think isn't talked about enough, is one of studio management. I think that it's obvious that Microsoft has obviously spent a ton of money to acquire a ton of studios. They have a lot of ammo, so to speak, at their disposal to be able to release a ton of games. But what isn't talked about a lot is the fact that they started spending all of this money I believe in 2018 when they first acquired Playground and Ninja Theory, and they created the initiative, and they started kind of this spending spree. And obviously it escalated further with Obsidian and then Bethesda and now Activision. They have all of this potential ammo, but since they've started doing that, they haven't really released anything that has come from that deal. And right now, outside of Forza Horizon 5, which was the first game that was released from Playground Games, which is a studio that they had originally acquired back in 2018, everything that's come since then from everybody else, like in Bethesda, they've launched 2 games. They've launched Ghostwire Tokyo and Deathloop. Both of those are actually PlayStation exclusives for a year. Obsidian launched The Outer Worlds, but that wasn't published by Microsoft. That was published by Private Division and was multi-platform. Psychonauts 2 also came out, but again, multi-platform. That game was well on its way before the acquisition. So there hasn't really been anything that has released yet in that or after those acquisitions started taking place. Okay. Now, I'm not saying that those games aren't going to release or that there's some big problem with the pipeline or anything like that. But what I am saying is that that pipeline is not fully developed yet. Microsoft wants there to be a kind of cadence where they are releasing a new exclusive game from their first party into Game Pass once every quarter or 2 quarters. And that's not happening yet. And I think that we are right on the cusp of when that is going to happen. But what's smart is to make sure that the crazy amount of money you've spent already, make sure you know what you have. You want to see how that pipeline takes shape and how close you are to that goal of 1 game a quarter. And then when you have that information and everything's firing on all cylinders, then you can pinpoint where you are slacking in. Maybe it's a specific genre, or maybe it's a specific, like, just flat out amount of games. Maybe you're not able to hit that and you need more output. Then you can smartly make investments in other acquisitions to kind of compensate that. What you don't want to have happen is just buy every single good deal that you see and end up with this huge amount of people on your payroll, IP in your back pocket, developers, and then it be too hard to manage and too hard to kind of create that pipeline that you're aiming for. There are examples of this actually happening in other businesses. One example I'll give is that of Target. If you're an American listener, you probably know what Target is. And if you're a Canadian listener, you probably know what Target was. See, there was a retail chain in Canada called Zellers that basically was a Canadian Walmart, for lack of a better term. But Zellers went bankrupt essentially, and they went out of business, and Target saw that as an opportunity to move into Canada, which is great because Canadians really wanted some form of some alternative to Walmart, and Target was Target. It was like the upper class Walmart, for lack of a better term. So people were very excited for that to come in here. And from Target's perspective, they saw all of these empty Zellers locations as a great way to get a ton of real estate really quickly so they can open up a ton of stores. It was a good deal. You got a lot for your money if you were going to buy all of those empty Zellers stores. So they did just that. And what happened was you had Target come in here without the distribution network set up, without the ability to consistently get inventory, without the ability to kind of support all of these stores that they just opened up immediately. And the stores all failed. The whole Target Canada failed. There's no more Targets in Canada. The whole Canadian part of the business died because they bit off way more than they can chew. And I'm not saying that would have happened to Microsoft if they made this $300 million purchase. Obviously, Microsoft's not going anywhere. Xbox is not going anywhere. But what I am trying to say is there is such a thing as having too much too fast. So that's another aspect as to why Microsoft didn't buy them. In terms of why Sony didn't buy them, I think that one is pretty cut and dry. Sony is a obviously massive company, extremely successful company, very successful company in terms of its gaming division, but they do not have this endless sea of money to constantly be acquiring stuff. That Bungie acquisition was a exceptional cost to them, and I think it was a direct reaction to what Xbox is doing. Sony right now, even though Xbox has had great sales months the last few months, Sony right now is ahead of Microsoft by a lot in terms of their software output. Right now. Now, Microsoft is poised to flip that around, but at this point in time, right now, Sony is ahead in terms of how much they're outputting games, especially like high-budget AAA blockbuster games that sell consoles. So, Sony's plan will be way more to kind of keep par with Microsoft in terms of what their output is, and with the belief that the quality of what they output will be superior, because right now it is. In my opinion, if you don't count like the Forza games, which are very, very good, but they serve a niche audience of racing fans, if you look at everything else that Microsoft has done, I think the last point in time where the quality, the objective quality of a Microsoft first-party game, the last time that the objective quality of a Microsoft first-party game was on par or better than Sony was Gears of War 3, which was more than a decade ago, right? So there's been a drastic difference between the objective quality of first-party Sony games versus Xbox games. And until that changes, which I personally believe it will change very soon, but until that changes, I don't think Sony really feels the pressure to go on these huge spending sprees when they really don't have to. Sony might look at those last 2 months or 3 months or however much it was where they lost the sales battle, the hardware sales battle to Xbox, as purely a outcome based on the chip shortages, which there's a strong argument to support that it was, because the Xbox Series S is actually not as affected as the Xbox Series X and PS5 are with those chip shortages. The 2 SKU model was smart from a perspective of them not using the exact same chips, so the output of those chips are a little bit higher. And you can make that argument that that's why there's a sales discrepancy where Xbox is winning. I personally think it's a combination of that and the impact of Game Pass, but yeah, like what I'm getting at is Sony doesn't really need to drop all of this money onto these acquisitions, even though it's such a good deal. And there is a kind of 3D chess move that could be being played here, where this is a strategic move for Sony to go after the Eastern business of Square Enix, which is the Final Fantasies, the Luminous Productions, the Kingdom Hearts, the Dragon Quest, that stuff, which I think is more core to Sony's main audience. As if you look at the numbers, especially lately, the profit margins and the productivity and specifically the sales productivity of what those studios have been able to accomplish, Crystal Dynamics and Eidos Montreal, isn't that great, and really doesn't hold a candle to the success of, say, Final Fantasy VII Remake, Final Fantasy 15, Final Fantasy 14, the MMO. Those games are just selling way, way better. So yeah, once again, it's a great deal for Embracer Group. Hopefully it's a great deal for Crystal Dynamics, Eidos Montreal. Hopefully they're able to get a lot more funding and a lot more support, as I don't think they really got that necessarily from Square Enix. If Marvel's Avengers is anything to show of that, there are rumors that a lot of the issues that players had with Marvel's Avengers were issues that were forced on the developers by Square Enix, which would be like the Spider-Man exclusivity, the reliance on this like quasi service-based multiplayer, and all of the microtransactions and stuff like that. So hopefully they're able to produce games the way they want to with Embracer Group. Embracer Group has also shown to be very supportive of Game Pass, launching several games into the service, and it's safe to assume that they could have the same openness to this new PlayStation service. So we could be seeing a lot of those games show up in the various services, which is great for exposure and obviously great for our wallets. So we'll just have to wait and see what comes from this. But yeah, Embracer Group is slowly becoming a massive player in the video game industry. So yeah, we look forward to seeing what is going to happen there. Until next time, remember to like and subscribe to the video or podcast, and feel free to reach out to me on Twitter with any comments or concerns or feedback. Also, make sure to hop into the Seasoned Gaming Discord, where we talk about gaming and other random stuff every single day. Thanks again, and have a good one. Remember to have fun out there, everybody. I'll talk to you soon.